can see in the title. I want to talk about a couple of things, but let me talk about the first part, which is this the beginning? And what exactly does that mean? Well, for those of you that, I'm sure almost all of you already know this, Awesome Kong apparently has left TNA. She at least asked for her release. We don't know if it was granted. We don't know if it's, part of the whole thing with her and Bubba. We don't know anything, but it does look legit, like she may have asked for her release. And maybe TNA granted it, though that doesn't mean anything because TNA often, people ask for the release and then TNA goes to them and begs them to come back, and they do. So she might not actually be gone, but it looks like she might be. And I think that's a bad move myself. Her and Gail Kim pretty much built the Knockouts division back when the Knockouts division was really good. And since Gail Kim left, in particular, I think it has been in a downward spiral. With the one, which is kind of funny because I'll talk about them in a minute. The one bright spot being the Beautiful People as an act, not maybe as far as in ring, but as an act and as something that could draw. And I'll get to that in a second. But and on top of that, apparently Alissa Flash, cheerleader Melissa, apparently she is gone from the company as well, and this is, we know is legit that she's gone, but that's not really that surprising. She hadn't been on TV for a while. I'm sure that they don't fit into her plans, and the fact that, like I said, she hadn't been on TV for a while, and usually when a regime change happens and you're not on TV and you're not being used very much, that doesn't usually it's usually not a good sign. So apparently she's gone. She'll probably go back to the Indies. I can't see her going to the WWE only because they got to look at her once. They didn't like her look, and which I think is unfortunate because I don't think she's ugly by any stretch of the imagination, and is gone. And then you have Awesome Kong, and if she's gone, I know a lot of people have questioned, where would she go? If you remember back, and I'm sure most of you probably don't, back when I think it was the end of 2008, if I remember right. Her contract was up, and WWE did offer Awesome Kong a contract. So she didn't take it. And I don't know what the WWE would do with her. I don't know if they would use her properly in the way people would like her to be used. I can't see her actually being brought in and being used as a complete and dominant monster where she's, kind of almost like Chyna was back in the day where, she was like on a different level than the other women. But I could definitely see them bringing her in as a huge monster. And I think she could be very over if they used her right. One of the things that I always felt was good about the Knockouts division was that they brought in women that could actually wrestle. They brought in athletic women, because I've always believed that if you targeted women's wrestling, and don't get me wrong, the women have to look good, just like the men have to look good for the most part. That's part of the deal. But if you could bring in women that were athletic and could work and were good looking, and maybe splice them in with people like Kong or someone else that, maybe didn't fit that mold, just as like the anti-establishment and much more athletic, that it would get over. Maybe not huge, crazy over. Maybe it would still be a gimmick. And I think probably Hulk Hogan and Eric Bischoff probably look at women's wrestling almost more as a gimmick, and to that point that they don't really care about it, and that's unfortunate. But I definitely think that could be the case, and I think Kong could be a huge star in WWE if used right. I don't think they would use her right, but I definitely think she could be huge, be very, very over, and almost a role model, like for women who are not supermodel looking or look like the girls that we see for models and Playboy and the regular divas for that matter, almost kind of the Mickey James angle, the Piggy James angle that we're seeing now. But that added with the fact that you've seen them come in and they basically brought back what we thought was going to be the Beautiful People. They broke them up, and tonight they kind of explained why. And I've heard a lot of people say, well, at least it makes sense. Well, yeah, it makes sense, but it's still stupid as fuck. I'm sorry, you took arguably your biggest act, okay? Arguably your biggest act, and you basically said, well, we're going to break them up. Which would be fine if when you break them up, you think you're going to have 2 acts that are equally as good. I don't think that's the case. I think you're going to wind up with 1 act who's a single wrestler who's as good, and you're going to have a group of other ones that people are going to get tired of their stick because they can't wrestle. So it's very sad. I don't think it's going to work as well, and it's mind-boggling. I don't care if it makes sense or not. It's not a good move. Just because it makes sense doesn't make it good. And I guess that leads to Impact itself. I had some people ask me about it if I watch it. I usually don't review TV shows per se, only because I don't think it's fair to review, particularly TV shows that the TV show is there to lead to the pay-per-views, and because ultimately how you grade it is how well did it lead up to the pay-per-views, how well did it sell the pay-per-views. So it's, show to show, I don't think it's fair to rate. But a lot of people have asked, because this is, kind of the first show. And I did talk, in all fairness, I did talk about the spoilers and the fact that spoilers were bad. And this show was not bad, don't get me wrong. It was definitely better than Raw, but I don't think that's saying much. But I think the things that everyone thought was going to be good turned out good, and maybe even better than they looked like on paper. And I think the things that were bad were just as bad as they looked. I think AJ and Flair was every bit as good as I think people thought it was going to be. I think the matches looked like they were going to be okay, and for the most part they were okay. You still had, Orlando Jordan going over the Pope, which I think is stupid. And some people said, oh, well, it makes sense because he was selling the leg. It's parody booking. And parody booking, making everyone look. You've now got You've got Pope who beat Wolf who beat Joe, and Angle. You've now next week, and sorry if I'm spoiling this, I think it's next week. Pope beats AJ in a non-title match. Which I mean, that doesn't necessarily work. I'm sorry, you can't book people like that. The only 2 people.
There's only a few people that have ever been able to be booked like that. Most of the people that have been able to been booked like that have been people who were on top and were heels, and you were basically booking to lose, but then they would come back and win. Ric Flair would be a good example. And then, but that's pretty much it. I mean, there's not too many people that you can continually book to lose and they're going to get over. It's just not the way it works. And so, I'm not big on that. The end of the show was wretched. I've seen some people say, oh, but it looks like it's going to make sense. Like I said, just because something makes sense doesn't make it good. Okay? Though I will say this, the show definitely made more sense. The show definitely looked better. The show didn't feel like a chore to watch. It was better in all those categories, but there were a lot of things that just it wasn't that they were bad, it wasn't that it didn't make sense, but it didn't look like good decision making. I mean, where is Joe, of course, who apparently is going to be on main eventing the next pay-per-view, and he wasn't even on this show. That's kind of worrisome. Where were a lot, we saw a lot of people that probably we didn't need to be seeing on the TV show, and a lot of people that, we should have been seeing on the TV show, we weren't seeing on the TV show. That kind of bothers me. But still, don't get me wrong, this was a good show, and that's just me being kind of nitpicky. And again, after watching the show, I'm not going to say I miss the 6-sided ring, but I definitely don't like the way they have the ring set up, because the barriers are far too close, in my opinion, for TNA to the ring, and it's going to really limit what some guys are going to be able to do, and it's going to take some of the action that TNA is known for, and I think really limit it. I think that's a huge mistake. But that's all I really had to talk about. I wanted to come in here on here and really talk about Kong and the fact that, if it's true, it's really sad, and I really mean that. Not just as someone that's a fan of hers, but I really think it's not a good direction, and I hope somebody goes to Bischoff and Hogan and says, we really can't let her go. She's kind of an important deal, and but it is what it is. I mean, you look what they did with the Beautiful People. I really don't think they care too much about the Knockouts division, so it is what it is. But with that, I'm out. Have a good one. Later.